One of anime's biggest cult hits from my point of view would have to be 2003's Kino's Journey, or Kino no Tabi. It's something known by enough people who frequently watch anime, though might be off the radar for most people. If you're not familiar with it, it follows Kino, a traveller who zips around country to country on their trusty motorrad Hermes. There are no real overarching arcs, and it's largely episodic, showcasing a different country in each story, which usually tackles various social or philosophical ideas, with one of its strengths being the sheer variety of different stories it gets to tackle. The one factor that is almost always the same though is Kino themselves. In the 2003 anime at least, they are the sole protagonist who we view this world alongside, and I guess Hermes is there too, though they are a bit less relevant to this video. Sorry Hermes. It's Kino's journey we're on after all. We're here to see how Kino reacts to the different countries and how they ponder their unique societal makeup. I think there's a tendency when viewing Kino's journey to focus on the countries and their individual messages, though it's Kino themselves that I want to talk about today, and a specific aspect of their character that kind of ties in with their visitations and who they are as a person. As the title of the video suggests, it's about their gender or lack thereof. We'll return to Kino in just a moment, but first I want to give a general introduction as well as a few disclaimers. Firstly, there will be spoilers for what I talk about in this video, though I won't be spoiling everything about each anime or manga I discuss, and I highly recommend checking out anything I mention today if it's of any interest to you. I always try to include some kind of recommendation element in videos like this, since ultimately, aside from whatever topic I'm covering, sharing media is very fun to me. What I'm going to talk about today are the types of stories I think you'll get a lot out of through vibing with them and just actually watching or reading them moment to moment, so I'm not sure much is lost if you hear my thoughts on them first. But of course, each to their own. If there is something that is spoiler worthy, if there's something you want to watch which I'm covering, there will be timestamps in the description so you can skip around if you want. Secondly, titles like Kino's Journey and Hoseki no Kuni, Land of the Lustrous, aren't explicitly about non-binary characters. Other media I talk about today will be, or on topics adjacent, though these works are pivotal to me in my exploration of this topic on a personal level, and I want to talk about them because they're great works that mean a great deal to me. I suppose I should also give a brief explanation on what the term non-binary is and what it might mean to me. It's something this video aims to explore, so its definition in regards to me and the stories I talk about will twist and turn throughout this video, but in a general sense, non-binary is used as an umbrella term to refer to people's gender identity that fits outside the common binary that a lot of people fall under, being male or female. A lot of different types of people will identify as non-binary or a label that falls underneath it, and I'm sure you could label the characters I talk about today as various things as well as myself. I would ask you not give me a label though. I'm fine with this umbrella term. It helps to give a name to this topic beyond simply identity, and hopefully it attracts people who are interested in non-binary manga and anime stories. In regards to what being non-binary means to me, I would say I'm not defined by the male or female binary. Think of me as not wanting any part of it, and I'll explore my reasonings as to why throughout this video, but don't expect me to fall under anything specific. That's the general gist. Essentially, this video will have a big focus on identity and individualism, what that means to me and how I navigate that space through different media. So with that kind of vague introduction out of the way, let's dive back into Kino and explore why they work as excellent and perhaps unintentional non-binary representation for me. Kino is characterized as someone short in stature who has short dark hair, and their eyes vary in color. They can be seen wearing a variety of clothing, usually militaristic, but always suited for travel, and it changes with whatever climate they're in. This could be described as a more masculine style of clothing, though it's mostly just practical, and I think something interesting to note is it often hides Kino's body shape. Kino's appearance then is intentionally vague and gender ambiguous, which is made out to be a point within the show. Both shows in fact, the 2003 adaptation and 2017's Kino's Journey: The Beautiful World. From memory, this also extends to both manga adaptations too, though we'll be mainly discussing Kino's anime outings here. I do want to make the distinction though that I'm not talking about the novels. I haven't read them, I'm not too interested in any later reveals or translations that might touch on Kino's gender further, at least for this video. I know sometimes people get a bit anal in regards to Kino or want to see them in a specific way, although I'm doing that right now too. But following their character in the anime, Kino is Kino, and we'll explore that in this section. The author has gone on record to say that Kino doesn't really think much when they use specific pronouns. They use a mix in the media they're present in, and largely they just think of themselves as Kino. The author does gender Kino in this article with she, but I think it's fairly clear Kino themselves doesn't present in a binary way. I'll leave a link to this interview with Keiichi Sugasawa in the description if you'd like to read it and make of it what you will. I think one of the better episodes to sum up Kino's relationship to gender in a very succinct way is weirdly one of my least favourites, and it's the first of the Colosseum two-parter. In the initial episode, episode 6 in the 2003 adaptation, Kino travels to a new country like usual, but when stopped at the gate, the guards are incredibly aggressive. This is a country that's one of the more barbaric ones that brute forces any travelers to fight in their upcoming tournament for entertainment, with the ultimate winner getting to create a single new law for the country. Kino as a character is more than capable of gunning down a posse of random guards, though in this instance wants to engage in the country's custom and see where this little adventure takes them. As part of this, Kino gets heckled by the guards and is called a little boy, and in response Kino says this:
"Please don't call me little boy. My name is Kino."
There's a focus here first on Kino denying being called a little boy. Parts of this could include the gender aspect, the height, and most likely the belittlement and type of tone being used to refer to them. In any case, there's a clear proclamation here that Kino does not want to be referred in this way and would rather instead be known as Kino. Later on in this episode, while Kino is fighting in the Colosseum, they manage to get a combatant at gunpoint and are attempting to get them to surrender without violence. Here, Kino's opponent ends up referring to Kino as Miss, and this is Kino's response:
"You please not call me Miss, it's a bit embarrassing. I have a name, it's Kino."
Again, it's the same thing. Clearly Kino doesn't want to be referred to as Miss either, especially evident by them expressing their embarrassment, and again, Kino reiterates that they have a name and are Kino. What I love about Kino and how they reject both attempts to gender them here is the focus on Kino wanting to be referred to by their name, a name which has great importance to them and leads us to one of my favourite episodes of the series for both adaptations. Land of Adults, which is the 4th episode of the 2003 series and 11th episode of the 2017 series, serves as backstory for Kino and the birth of this character effectively. It's one of my favourite parts of the entire show that's taken on tons of new meaning as I've aged and rewatched it. I'd really urge you to go watch Kino, or this episode in particular first, as it's great, and I will be explaining it since it's pretty pertinent to what I want to explore in this video. As per usual, this episode begins with a traveller arriving at a new country, except it's not the Kino we're familiar with, but someone older with no motorrad. A motorrad is just a motorcycle, by the way. Sometimes Kino has fancy words for certain things. This traveller is looking for an affordable place to stay, and we're introduced to the Kino we're familiar with, but much younger. Like the other countries Kino would later visit, this land has a specific gimmick to it, and it's that when a child turns 12 years old, they have an operation to turn into an adult. We learn this as Kino and the traveller talk. They exchange viewpoints, and this traveller is unlike anything Kino has ever seen, not matching her definition of an adult. The two talk some more, fix up a motorrad which they name Hermes, and we move on to the day Kino is going to get her operation to turn into an adult, which coincides with the traveller leaving. As they're about to head off though, they catch wind of Kino telling her parents that she doesn't want to have the surgery or take over the family business of running the inn, something all children are expected to do, inherit their parents' lines of work. In response, Kino's parents pull a knife and adults gather round. They insult Kino and tell her that she's a mistake, a waste of life. And in a spur-of-the-moment decision, the traveller jumps between Kino and her family, taking the knife in her place. You may have noticed I actually gendered Kino in the last few times I've mentioned them, and this is intentional, as if you haven't seen this story before, you wouldn't know that at this point Kino isn't actually Kino. They go by a different, forgotten name, and it's only until this act by the traveler that things really begin to change. In this story so far, the only character who is called Kino is actually that traveler, and upon their sacrifice and the child's escape from the country of adults, we come to witness the Kino we know be born. Divorced from expectation, from whatever the adult surgery is, from their name and gender, we see Hermes ask this child for their name, and the response is Kino.
Hey, I'm Kino. Has a nice ring, huh?
Sure, I like it.
I am Kino!
That's a great name.
There's a lot to unpack here, but firstly, I think this whole episode and Kino's backstory is a really evocative and resonant piece of writing that you can apply a lot of different things to, especially if you're a queer person. Essentially, we witness Kino transition from one thing to another, and you're free to fill in the gaps for whatever you like, but what I will posit is that this event provides Kino with a blank slate. From this point onwards, they can choose what they want to be, and their first decision is to latch onto the traveler that inspired them to grasp onto their own sense of freedom. From watching this episode, we come to understand that the country of adults was a very rigid place, especially in the freedoms it granted its citizens. The main one spelled out to us is the fact that you have to take up the work of your parents and that there's a very rigid social structure set in place here. Then we get to the more nebulous aspects concerning the adult surgery, and it's here that the episode questions what being an adult even is. You could even go one further and say that it questions what being human is. Are we primarily characterized by our roles in society and our jobs? Do the systems in place determine who we are and what we do? Kino overall has a lot to say about this topic. The next episode of the 2003 anime, Three Men Along the Tracks, touches on the nature of works and jobs, though this backstory episode in particular I feel interweaves this with the theme of identity, and it ends up serving as a core pillar of Kino's character. The Land of Adults shows the lack of freedom, especially in personal expression, that is afforded to the citizens of this country, and in particular children. It's a fantastical but still very real version of a struggle I think most children in the world will come to grapple with, which is their identity. The Land of Adults explores a small part of this in how parental figures in society shapes us according to its wishes without any regard for our own. In real life, a lot of the ideas enforced on us are there to protect us. Certain rules exist for reasons, and certain social rules or codes are there to help maintain some kind of order. At least, that's what we're told. I feel like I'm oversimplifying a lot of our lives here, and this isn't really a full-on philosophy video, and I don't have any education in philosophy. But my point is that a lot is enforced on us. We don't have a say in it until much later in our lives, and by the time we do have something to say, maybe we've just accepted how things have turned out as a fact of life. We have to do things this way. We have to get the adult surgery. We have to take on our parents' jobs at the inn. We can't be a traveler. We can't change our assigned name. We can't change the gender we were assigned with. But you actually can, and this story exhibits this. It may be at the cost of leaving everything behind. Your family, your old life, home, safety, and yet for some that risk might be worth taking so they can feel more like their true selves. When I think of this episode and Kino Jr. gradually learning from their namesake and seeing the horror and hopelessness they experience as their parents are about to discard them, it feels very real. For a lot of people, I'm sure this moment can resonate with them in various ways. We're often told our parents and loved ones will love us unconditionally for who we are, though for some, that isn't the case. Children can be objectified and might be pushed out or disowned because of the people they associate with, their choice of career path, or how they choose to represent themselves, like through their gender. All of these aspects are touched on in this episode in some way, I believe. Kino being influenced by Kino, not wanting to run the family business, and their eventual transition to the genderless gun-toting blob we know and love. All of this is here. Equally though, as much as this episode can evoke the pain of real-life troubles, it also illustrates how satisfying change can be, with the grand moment of freedom we witness as Kino escapes the confines of the Land of Adults on the back of Hermes. We see the world open up before them. The sense of freedom here is palpable, especially when we see Kino and Hermes collapse in this field of flowers. To me, this is a big part of why I love Kino's journey. It's this sense of freedom. The journey Kino finds themselves on is a physical one as much as it is an internal one. The primary way they characterize themselves is not through their gender, but them being a traveler. It's the most important thing to them. The journey is a vehicle for self-discovery and expression for Kino. You could even see traveling as a metaphor for fluidity, of wanting to experience the world and various things without being tied down to any specific labels, not settling down anywhere in particular, not staying longer for more than 3 days as per Kino's rule. Kino does not want to be defined. It's a bit ironic maybe as I discuss being non-binary. A part of that will be the rejection of labels, but through this process I will be assigning them. I partly feel like this is just something we can't escape, as it can be genuinely helpful to give certain things names. It may also show that I still have a lot of room for growth in my ideology and how I view the world. After all, this video is more an exploration of those ideas and doesn't amount to a full conclusive statement. To me, Kino is my primary example of what I am, gender-wise, of what being non-binary of whatever I am means to me, and that is absence. It's divorcing myself from my assigned gender and others because it's not something I particularly want or care for. In the end, I want to be seen for me, just like how Kino is Kino. And just like them, I think exploring and traveling through my own identity is at the core of who I am. I don't ever think it will be a fixed or named thing. To segue into our next segment, I want to focus on this idea of the self and just how tied it is to our lived experience. Kino's journey shows Kino becoming who they are through a chance meeting, and they will continue to develop as they meet all sorts of other people and visit other countries. I think this next anime really captures this idea of taking in lived experiences and of meetings with others and absorbing them into ourselves to inform our own character, in perhaps a very literal way. Hoseki no Kuni, or Land of the Lustrous, is a 2012 manga with a 2017 anime adaptation, and we'll be touching on both here. This is a work I watched as it aired, and it's honestly been a life-changing piece of media for me in many ways, responsible for me meeting many of my closest friends, which has caused a domino chain of occurrences to make me who I am today. But I feel like the aspect I just mentioned of taking in your life experiences and meetings to inform your identity doesn't just fit this work in a meta context for me. Hoseki follows a group of sentient gems who all live together on a large island, and the primary character we follow is Phosphophilite, the youngest gem and one of the most brittle, meaning unlike their fellow gems, what they're capable of is severely limited. From the beginning, Hoseki explores the idea of identity through the occupation you're provided. Phos has this desire to be something useful to their family, looking for ways to contribute or help, though due to their clumsiness and weak body, they're more of a burden than not. Certain gems fight this presence called the Lunarians, who come down in sunspots and shatter the gems, stealing them away and taking them to the moon, though this isn't a duty Phos can perform. Other more specific duties like reassembling gems that break, a doctor role essentially, also doesn't suit Phos either, with them ultimately not having anything to do. There's definitely a feeling of inferiority from Phos. I think this is largely masked by their more upbeat attitude, but they want to feel useful, and perhaps they don't feel fully accepted for who they are, with these urges pushing them to change, and change they do. The core of Hoseki's story for me is how Phos gradually changes, presenting us with a pretty literal interpretation of the ship of Theseus as parts of their body get swapped out one by one. The story eventually goes to some wild places and touches on many ideas, but seeing Phos change in this way is a really solid example of how our identities are shaped by those around us. Let me set the scene for one of these changes. Every year in winter, due to the lack of sun, the gems struggle to stay awake, so most end up going into hibernation. They all wear cute puffy clothing and sleep together in one big massive comfy bed. This year though, Foss opts not to sleep with the rest and wants to stay up due to their feelings of weakness and inferiority. They aren't the only character awake though, as besides their sensei, Antarcticite is someone who is only present during winter. Outside of it, they can't form themselves and are a liquid, so effectively this is the only time they're alive. It's a solitary fate only heightened by the snowy blank canvas of winter. Together, the two of them break ice floes, get to know each other, and form a bit of a mentor-student relationship, but tragedy strikes one after another. Foss loses their arms, leading them to getting a replacement, and eventually, during a battle, Antarcticite is shattered and ends up being taken by the Lunarians in Foss's place. Antarcticite is a great example of this change within Foss, where we see Foss wanting to become like Antark, with Foss eventually mimicking their style and mannerisms. This change is both an aesthetic and internal change. You can parallel this to Kino taking on the form and name of the Traveler in their origin story. Perhaps there's an element of guilt there too, of carrying on someone else's legacy. But in both instances, they look up to these people and want to be like them. They end up taking on similar roles too, Foss learning to combat the winter and Kino becoming a traveler. The influence of others is a powerful thing. As a short side tangent, there's some level of hypocrisy in what I'm trying to discuss, I think. I say that our identities are informed by others and present that positively for the most part, but doesn't this also apply to our parental or guardian figures that influence us too? I think the distinction here is you yourself deciding what to follow and what not to, as nebulous as that can be. There's also the fact that who inspires Kino and Foss in these instances are other individuals and not a social group or a role like a parent. I think there's a lot to potentially dig into here that I didn't think about initially while writing this script, so it could be fun to dive into at a later date in another video. For now though, treat all of this as food for thought, something to keep in mind as you watch the video or think about in regards to your own sense of identity. For now, let's move back to Hoseki. As well as this, Foss goes on to lose parts of their original body, replacing them with other materials. The most relevant of these changes is present in the manga for me, so spoilers if you've only watched the anime. Skip to this time if you'd like to read that for yourself. Later on, another replacement happens where Foss loses their head, the only replacement then being the head of Lapis Lazuli, and I don't think it's a stretch to equate merging with another character in this way as taking on the ideals and appearance of someone else. While it might not be outright saying it, I do think Hoseki is drawing some kind of parallels to the idea that our identities are informed by the things we experience and the people we meet. We either are changed by them unconsciously, or we consciously see something we want to become and gradually change. Hoseki as a story doesn't have any explicit relation to being non-binary, but it fits in with some ideas I'm discussing, and the presentation of the gems is most definitely agender. They are genderless rock people who do look very slender and pretty, but are pretty androgynous as well. I especially like their outfits, which combine traditional masculine and feminine aspects, like their suit-like design, little ties and shorts, then with long gloves and shape language that shows off their legs. Their glittering shiny eyes and hair also evoke makeup or something more traditionally feminine to me, resulting in something wholly unique and very androgynous in their design. It's important to note that I'm not fully equating being non-binary with androgyny, but there's a certain fluidity in appearance and aesthetic that is important to me when discussing non-binary identity. The way we present, as I'll continue to discuss throughout this video, is very important. It's a measure of outward expression and freedom. I also really like the art here, and most characters I'll discuss today have some kind of visual flair that I find interesting or affirming. Hoseki is a rich work in so many different ways. Its story is deep, the artwork is some of the most unique I've seen in manga, and the anime does 3D CG animation amazingly thanks to Studio Orange's great efforts. It's something that should be seen regardless of this non-binary interpretation or exploration, but if you want to approach it with this lens in mind, I think you can. Moving on, let's talk about some actual manga that discusses non-binary characters, issues, or things adjacent to being non-binary. I won't go into as much depth here as I have with the last two pieces of media, but I want to explore some recent things I've read to acknowledge certain patterns, issues, and give a consensus on what means the most to me with works that have non-binary representation. This section will also serve as a way to highlight some non-binary related manga that you might not have read that could resonate with you and might be worth reading. Love Me for Who I Am is a very cute coming-of-age type story that sees a young non-binary person called Mogumo grapple with their identity, specifically in how others see them and love them through various lenses, like through clothing, their family, their romances, and friendships. It has a varied cast of queer characters and explores a lot of ideas and issues in a mostly safe and perhaps a little overly saccharine way. Boys Run the Riot primarily follows a trans mask lead but features a non-binary character and is a great story focusing on queer issues as well as fashion and how important it is for us to feel comfortable and represented with what we wear. Glitch by Shima Shinya has some casual non-binary representation that isn't really the focus, but is a neat little mystery manga with some very unique artwork. To a degree, I think Devilman is also worth checking out due to the character of Ryo Asuka and certain developments there. There's some interesting experimentation in regards to gender that I think may have gone on to inspire other authors to do the same. I don't think there's anything explicitly non-binary here, but it's something that could provide food for thought, especially if you're into manga history. And speaking of manga history, Osamu Tezuka's Princess Knight features a character with both the heart of a boy and girl that explored gender very early on in manga's lifetime, and is something that could be worth looking into if you're interested in the history of manga and its queer connections. I feel like Demon School Iruma-kun, while not a manga centered around queer issues, does have some delightful representation in opera, who is very ambiguous in their gender, but the important part is that they're accepted for who they are, which is opera. It's a very sweet series in general that's quite queer friendly, with it including some various queer coded characters in a traditional battle shonen type story. It's really nice to have stories like this, your regular battle shonen which everyone grew up with, like One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, etc., but with this inclusive aspect that you can feel a bit more a part of because it has these queer characters. Sometimes the works I like the most aren't explicitly about being non-binary or queer, but just have characters or ideas that fit, evident by stories like Hoseki and Kino. Opera, like Kino, is another character who I think embodies my ideal for self-representation, and Iruma is a top-tier manga that's super bubbly and happy and fun to read, so I had to mention it here. Works that are explicitly about being non-binary include Until I Love Myself, The Journey of a Non-Binary Manga Artist by Poppy Pesuyama, which is this autobiographical account of a non-binary manga artist in Japan. A lot of this is about gender dysphoria and sexual harassment and is illustrated in a very minimal style to maintain a level of anonymity, I think. X-Gender by Asuka Miyazaki is also another manga that's similarly autobiographical and touches on similar subjects. Despite being focused on being non-binary first and foremost, I found these two the most alienating and enjoyed them the least. I think in part it's because these aren't really meant to be stories in the traditional sense. This is someone's actual life and experience that's being conveyed to you. Though for me, because I struggled to relate to them, it made them a bit difficult to read and the artwork on display isn't the greatest, so it failed to suck me in. If anything, I think what they do represent well is how different someone under the non-binary umbrella can be. One person's experiences might not resonate with you at all, which makes complete sense with my understanding of what being non-binary means. It's something very individualistic. You might find these two interesting though, so maybe check them out if you find their synopsi interesting. Sentaku no Toki follows a student coming across a genderless alien, with the series following the main character having to make a binary choice for it to become male or female. Similarly, Just Like Mona Lisa does the exact same thing, with a genderless character being swayed by one male and one female love interest. For both of these examples, I opted to dip out early on as I really don't like how these two are framed. Someone else choosing who you are and your identity by making a forced binary decision is pretty uncomfortable for me. There's absolutely room for a story following this idea, especially in say a horror context, or in a way that carefully explores it, but the way in which the stories in these two unfolded made me feel like the non-binary character had no agency and was being used in this fetishistic way that I did not vibe with. A similar manga that treats its non-binary character in a fetishistic way and is actually horror focused is Surenai Hodo. It has a much longer full name. This sees a boy haunted by his non-binary classmate who they develop a curious crush on, and a big deal is made out of discovering their gender, with them being equated often to some sort of supernatural being. There's a cool idea here, but I don't think it's tackled very well. Often the artwork is a bit too overdone, and the way it approaches its subject matter is far too horny for its own good. A lot of these works that feature non-binary characters are actually quite sexual, with that being one of the main patterns I noticed between reading all of these. A big part of why is other characters questioning how to comprehend non-binary people in a sexual as well as romantic way, with the issues of them approaching them as if they're male or female cropping up frequently. At its worst, you have characters who will superimpose a gender onto others, but usually I think that most authors are coming at this through the lens of curiosity as an idea they want to explore. Last Gender really focuses on its sexual aspects, and while it's not free from problems, I feel like it fares better than most of these as it embraces its concept of being about the sex lives of queer people. It questions what normal is for most people and offers a range of different characters who experience sexual and romantic relations differently. Even one of my favourite manga I read as part of this exploration, Q, What is Love, touches on this idea of a character seeing the non-binary protagonist in a binary way. Sadly, it's not been fully translated, and it ends with a preview of someone saying they can't see the main character as anything but a woman, so I'm not sure which direction it ends up going in. But its prior chapters have this focus on animals and how the binaries we believe our world to be composed of aren't actually set in stone, with many creatures not strictly adhering to this two-gender system. It's exceptionally cute and educational, and someone should translate the rest of it. From reading all of these, I found out a few things about myself and my relationship with media that depicts non-binary characters. Firstly, it's often the stories that aren't explicitly about non-binary characters that appeal to me the most. These are works that might explore identity overall and are the most malleable in terms of you relating to them. I think this makes sense though, as if we look at some of the work that is more focused on being non-binary, it's very personal, like the two autobiographical accounts. I'm not sure these are works you read and see yourself in or discover yourself in, as they're so focused on the individual people who created them. They might be better for people to read so they can understand certain issues non-binary people face, rather than being a work you'll feel speaks to you on an individual level. Another observation is that a lot of these works focus on the aspects of being non-binary differently, in different amounts, and those characters are also very varied, which is no surprise as it's a very broad term that can describe a huge number of people. Sexual and romantic elements come next. I think a decent amount of people will be puzzled by non-binary people as they're breaking certain rules they see the world by. If someone isn't a certain gender, does that mean they can be sexually or romantically attracted to them or not? Perhaps certain works aim to answer these questions or provide some type of fantasy or personal sexual exploration. It does feel like this often comes at the expense of these non-binary characters though, which we see in Sentaku no Toki and Just Like Mona Lisa. There's a lot of ground to potentially explore here, and I don't feel very well equipped to explore these aspects. It's very daunting, and I don't currently possess the romantic or sexual forethought to think about myself even in this context, but I do understand why people are eager to explore non-binary issues related to these topics. The best I can do is segue into another non-binary adjacent work with sexual themes which I'd like to discuss. Welcome Back Alice is one of Shuzo Oshimi's newest works, and if you're unfamiliar with him, he often creates manga that explores sexual and gender-related themes through the genre of horror or psychological dramas. This story primarily follows two characters, Yohei and Kei, who grew up together as childhood friends but eventually get separated when Kei moves away. Years later, Kei returns, though their appearance has completely changed and they look just like a girl. Oshimi's penchant for psychosexual drama is here in full force, and it's pretty well executed, interweaving this heavy-hitting coming-of-age story that tackles the ideas of the self and how gender and sexual urges are wrapped into all of that. Numerous times throughout the series, we'll hear Kei say they've quit being a man or boy, and at one point they say, "A guy's supposed to be like this is how guys are. People say things like that, but none of it worked for me," implying that what was expected of them as a male wasn't something they were ever happy with, and it wasn't something that personally fit them. Furthermore, while Kei presents in a feminine way and is seemingly happy with it, they also don't describe themselves as a girl either. They are neither binary. But a core part of Welcome Back Alice involves this pain that comes with trying to relinquish that very binary, and this process presents many difficulties with interpersonal relationships and sexuality being chief among them. Oshimi mentions that Welcome Back Alice is born out of a lot of personal pain, much of it relating to their troubles with being a man and their inadequacies and negative feelings surrounding sex. Though I think through exploring these problems, Oshimi has made one of the most heartfelt and personally resonating stories about being a non-binary person, at least to me. It illustrates the struggle of letting go of the gender systems and ideas that hold us in place, and how it's not something that's always a smooth process. You'll trip up with how you've been conditioned to see the world previously. You'll be filled with self-doubt and might have to fight the previous way you viewed the world and its people. But through this struggle and the sexual darkness that pervades the manga, Oshimi illustrates these beautiful scenes featuring Kei and Yohei trying to grasp onto a time when this gendered aspect of their lives wasn't present. I think there are a lot of ways to interpret this return to childhood idea that Welcome Back Alice plays with, though for me, I see it as a guidepost. Once long ago, the two felt this certain way as children. There's this possibility then that they can feel that happy and connected again. Of course, it won't fully be the same, but by tapping into those childhood feelings, it might be possible to change. Amongst this messy hypersexual rom-com plot that Welcome Back Alice presents, we eventually get to a point where both Yohei and Kei are fully on board with putting their gender behind them. This is partially done through reminiscing of the past, and a good line of what I mean is when Yohei says, "I want to go back to the time when we weren't guys or girls, before all that got put in our heads." There's also the flashback when Kei as a child exclaims, "Why is this my body? Will I never be able to get out of it?" But there's also this equation of returning to childhood to sexual acts or combining. I'm not sure this will work for everyone, but I think in this moment it tries to reframe the act of having sex as a more positive and spiritual act, as if the two are returning to nothingness. It's depicted as such anyway, especially in a beautiful scene near the end with minimal but expressive art, which is a strong suit of Oshimi's. This whole end scene is so rich, and I feel like you could probably analyze it for days on end. Welcome Back Alice breaks down definitions of gender and sexuality and ultimately reduces it all into raw, unfiltered feeling. It goes on to see the act of sex as a way to return to nothing, to a pure blank slate where you can rebuild your self-image, which is very impactful as previously it illustrates how our sex and sexual acts define and constrict us based on society's limited view of how sex should work. But breaking that in this case results in this ecstatic and bright sense of freedom. By the end, Kei and Yohei seem genuinely happy. They seem to have figured something out, and it's not at the expense of viewing sex as something wholly negative. I at least don't think it demonizes it in the end, and it might posit that there are healthy ways you can engage in sex that can even help you strengthen your own sense of identity. Most importantly, what Welcome Back Alice says to me is that if happiness is attainable by going against pre-established norms, if we would feel better by stripping away some of the things life has taught us, then it's worth trying to do to be more of ourselves. The way in which it says it's okay to be neither gender, and you can find immense satisfaction and warmth in that, is also very affirming. I especially like how the more positive scenes are drawn, like the two's unification in the penultimate chapter, or any scene of Kei smiling. But especially, I love the scene where Kei's hair is being cut near the end. The it feels good, as all this weight is being shed, really hits me. I often feel like hair is very important. It's something I've always personally struggled with throughout my life, and often it's one of the first things that separates people's images of male or female people. Guys usually have short hair, girls have it long, and if you stray from this, people start looking at you weirdly. It's of course not that cut and dry, but in my own experience, I've always hated having short hair. There's something very comforting to me having it long, having the option to cover my eyes or let it touch my neck. It just feels right to me. And when I was younger and had to get it cut, I'd hate it. It made me genuinely miserable. I also really don't like others touching my hair, whether they're cutting it or not, but because of this and me wanting to keep my hair longer, on an almost daily basis I had to deal with people asking me when I was going to cut it, or people saying, "You look like a girl." Looking back, I don't think I realized quite how much that affected me, because now I realize I must have been pretty upset that most people never accepted me for who I was fully. There was a time in my teens when my hair did get cut, quite short too, and it was after I did a messy job of trying to do it myself because I didn't want anyone else to do it, only for the worst to happen, and most of it ended up coming off. I got a lot of attention for it, and I ended up getting some genuinely nice compliments. People saying they liked it and they liked my face or eyes, but it also made me really sad. All of what was complimented was already there. It was just under a bit of my hair, and cutting it off made so much of a difference to these people, but it was at the expense of my own identity and feelings. It sucks that stuff like someone's hairstyle can be gated by gender, that you can be looked down on or even forced to change an aspect of yourself just to fit in so that you're more in line with the definitions and wishes of other people. This has been a bit of a tangent, but I think it helps illustrate the importance of hair, especially when we're discussing topics like identity, since your personal aesthetic is a part of that and is the most outward-facing aspect about you. So scenes involving hair and cutting hair are very important to me. I like this one in Welcome Back Alice a lot, since it could show that Kay is further experimenting and exploring who they are. Initially, they changed to look much more feminine, but perhaps they realized over time that the look they had for themselves wasn't quite right, and maybe a mid-length hairstyle like this made them feel more affirmed in their identity. You could try to spin it that this is Yohei influencing them to change since they saw that hairstyle in their dreams first, but the distinction here is that it's Kei's decision to change, and maybe like Kino or Foss, the influence of others has helped determine how they want to identify themselves. To close out this video, I want to go over one of my favorite mangaka and a couple of their works, as they've been pretty pivotal in helping me shape my identity as well as my awareness and interest in queer issues, and that person is Yuki Kamatani. Firstly, we'll touch on Hiraeth, which honestly doesn't have much bearing on this video. It's a manga about a girl undergoing a period of grief, an immortal and a god going on a road trip to find death. There is the discussion of some queer topics, though mostly I have to bring it up since I put Hani, the god character, in the thumbnail. They fit way too well in the composition I wanted and are very pretty, so I couldn't stop myself from including them. Hani is this god with a fascination for humans, but is also divorced from them and can be weirdly apathetic at times. I feel like this type of personality also applies to Our Dreams at Dusk's Someone, a non-binary character who is responsible for kickstarting my ideas for this video. If you haven't heard of Our Dreams at Dusk, it follows a gay boy named Tasuku who moves to a new town and eventually discovers a drop-in center that's full of different LGBTQ+ characters. Most of these have an arc dedicated to them, with it explaining what life is like for these people, including people with different sexualities and genders, which people might not be aware of or struggle to understand. One of these characters and the owner of the drop-in center is who I primarily want to talk about today, and this person is Someone. I think their name, or lack thereof, sums up Someone really well. This character was the catalyst for me to think about my own gender identity in a deeper way. You see, someone is someone. They are who they are, they don't fit in the gender binary and don't possess any labels, even so much as a typical name. They simply exist as themselves, as this mysterious character that nobody knows much about. They even appear almost magically at points, jumping through the air in godlike fashion, which is another reason why I wanted to establish Hani from Hiraeth. Personality-wise, they're slightly similar too if you go past their surface. Hani initially is very approachable and friendly, while Someone is a bit cold. Both actually don't seem too bothered by others when you get down to it and are pretty absorbed in other things, though both do care to an extent, at least for the people around them. When I reread Our Dreams at Dusk recently, I had largely forgotten about Someone, but this time they struck out to me the most. There is a want or need for us as humans to categorize and label. It can make things easier, but it can also reduce and hurt people by limiting possibilities. Someone is a character without those restrictions, almost to a comical extent. Though it works really well, especially later on when they talk with the main character Tasuku about their identity, where they state that whatever Tasuku thinks they are, they are. That level of freedom and fluidity is hard to grasp though. It can be complicated and frustrating to deal with someone like that, but a realization dawns on the main character while he's having this discussion. That it's also fine to not fully understand, and the fact that someone is merely alive and breathing is enough. To be you and to be alive is enough. I found immense comfort in that idea that I don't have to be anything specific. Maybe that's a part of me that's running away from life and all my problems, but I think there is something deeper there. I am so much happier with the thought that I don't have to conform to certain standards that don't fit me. I mentioned my hair earlier as an example of something like this. To me now, it's not the hair of a girl or boy, it's just my hair. It's soft, I like brushing it, sometimes it annoys me when it gets in my face, and sometimes when it's windy, it feels really nice when it blows everywhere. It's a comfort to me and makes me feel more like me, so I want to keep it and nurture it as much as possible. And the same goes for other aspects of myself too, as well as the entirety of my being. A lot of the works mentioned in today's video have helped me question who I am and the merit of the labels others in society have put on me, and I came to the realization that I feel better without any of them. I used to be really scared of growing up, and I still am to an extent, but it's gotten a bit better recently. And part of that is because I realized I equated that fear of growing up with the fear of growing up to become a man. I was always scared of growing body hair and facial hair especially, of my hands looking like some adults, thick and large. I never liked muscles or the way short hairstyles look on me, nor the type of clothes some people would wear that fit their standards of male. I have never liked using urinals and always go into stalls because men's bathrooms feel extremely uncomfortable. Anytime someone equated me to my father or mentioned me as being some kind of man made me feel extremely sad and just grossed out. I'm sure there's piles of things I could say adjacent to all of this that will build up my aversion of this idea that I had to be a man, but seeing others around me choose different paths and finding media like Our Dreams at Dusk did make me realize I have a choice in how I see myself at least. Things like facial hair, while being extremely dysphoric to me, are manageable, and there's plenty of clothes I like too which don't make me feel like I'm wearing something for one gender or another. And it's these little choices and decisions, as well as the decision to say that I'm neither binary gender, that help me feel much more at peace with who I am and ultimately make me happy. Whether it be androgynous sentient gems, nameless borderline supernatural nobodies, literal gods, or humble travelers, these are the type of characters and representation that call out to me within anime and manga. And as fantastical as they may all be, they strike this profoundly human chord within me and remind me that I don't have to be anything specific, that I don't have to accept any label anyone gives me or appeal to what others expect me to be. All I have to be is me. If you've watched up until this point, thank you so much. I barely scratched the surface of the works I've discussed in this video and urge you to check them out if you haven't already. I might cover them again in some different contexts, but I'm really content with my exploration here. This is ultimately a video for me first and foremost, so I don't know if people are going to really vibe with it, but that's not really the point. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed, and if you'd like more from me, I have a whole channel here where I talk about manga. The recent vampire video I did is probably closest to this one, but usually I talk about cancelled manga or Weekly Shonen Jump's history as it's one of my primary interests. If any of this sounds cool, please subscribe, like the video, maybe leave a comment too to let me know if anything here resonated with you, or if you have similar anime or manga that have helped you in your quest to find out who you are. I'd also urge you to check out my Patreon if this spoke to you in any way, as legitimately anything helps, and I appreciate people's generosity immensely since I don't have ads on any of my videos. There's also some bonus videos and podcasts of me yapping over on the Patreon, and for $1 a month you can get access to everything. Though with the $3 tier, I'll also draw you a unique little doodle that will show up in my video credits as thanks alongside everyone's names. So thank you. Trinity, Jade, Kaizoku Gairu, Soracool Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Fako, Yellowtail, Lay Sluggard, Chris P. Bacon, Joe Henshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Yozakura Psycho, Wurzel, Violent, Cactus, Joni, City Name E, Vina Burrito, Caffeine Dad, Cryonaut, Crash, 41IZ, Hong, Jamie Reynolds, Manu, Pokey Emblem, James Miller, Jopa Monkey, Just a Virus, Star Sphinx, PK Broly, Fenrir Black, Elijah Espinoza, Neo Humanoid, Mark Nilsson, Electro Pirate, and also Hilltop, Vako Draws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, Jonathan Dragonet, John Sanford, Color, Jaime, Strawberry Prosione, Vaz, Palette, Ruina, Juice, TG Talks Manga, Chromie Knox, Eric Gorski, Miss the Shira, Gay Shark, and Grizz Exploder at the $1 tier. Thank you all so much for being patrons, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.